I dream of becoming a mystery writer. Maybe because I spend so much time thinking about crimes and coming up with mysterious plot lines, I've developed a habit of paying close attention to everything around me. But dreams and reality are two completely different things. At the time, my income from writing was extremely unstable. Some months I made enough to cover basic expenses, while other months I barely earned anything at all. So I took whatever temporary jobs I could find to make some extra money and keep pursuing my passion for writing. That day I had been hired to repaint a wall in a house downtown. The job seemed simple enough, so after confirming the address and the basic requirements, I packed up my supplies and arrived on time. The person who opened the door was a young man who was extremely attractive. He introduced himself as Mike with a friendly smile. I quickly followed Mike inside. The interior was even more impressive than the outside, with everything spotless and neatly arranged. Mike seemed to have a particular love for art because there were photographs and paintings hanging all over the walls. I became so distracted looking at them that I almost forgot why I was there until Mike spoke up and led me to the wall that needed repainting. He had already prepared almost everything, even carefully laying plastic sheeting along the base of the wall to protect the floor. All I had to do was arrange my tools and prepare the paint he wanted, so I quickly got to work. But just as I bent down to check the paint can, I suddenly heard a click behind me, followed by the flash of a camera. I turned around and saw Mike holding a camera pointed at me. Being photographed without being asked made me pretty uncomfortable, so I immediately asked why he had done that. Mike seemed to realize he had crossed a line. He lowered the camera and explained that he had only wanted a picture to remember the moment by, then quickly apologized in a way that seemed genuinely sincere. Mike then went into his bedroom and said he would give me some space to work. I started rolling the first strokes of paint onto the wall, but for some reason, I couldn't fully concentrate. With the bedroom door closed behind me, my imagination started running again, and I found myself thinking up a mystery story about what might be happening inside that room. Right then, a sudden noise came from the bedroom. It sounded almost exactly like a power saw running. I immediately stopped painting and stared at the door, but before I could react, Mike walked out holding his laptop. The disturbing sound had actually been coming from the computer. Mike was still focused on the screen as he walked straight toward the kitchen. Everything went back to normal. Until I started painting near the bottom of the wall. The plastic sheeting was getting in the way of my roller, so I pulled it back slightly to make things easier. But as soon as the floor underneath was exposed, I noticed several dried, dark red stains along the base of the wall. At first, I assumed it was just old paint, but when I pulled the plastic back a little farther, I saw more of the same stains underneath. I started feeling uneasy and crouched down for a closer look. That was when something small near the corner of the wall caught my eye. I picked it up and realized it was a woman's fake fingernail, still covered in red polish with tiny decorative rhinestones attached to it. The fake nail immediately brought back all the thoughts I had been trying to dismiss. I stood up and quietly looked around the house again, this time paying closer attention to the pictures on the walls. Earlier, I had assumed they were just ordinary artistic photographs, but now I noticed something they all had in common. Every single one of them was of a woman. I didn't want to take any chances, so I immediately pulled out my phone and called 911. As soon as I made the call, Mike's voice suddenly came from behind me, asking if I had finished the job. Startled, I turned around and saw him standing only a short distance away. Maybe I was too nervous by then because I couldn't stay calm enough to pretend nothing was wrong. Instead, I immediately told him everything I was suspicious about. I pointed to the red stains on the floor and accused Mike of laying down the plastic beforehand to deliberately hide them. Then I held up the fake nail, mentioned all the photographs of women on the walls, and brought up the fact that he had taken a picture of me without permission when I first arrived. Mike kept trying to explain himself. I just wanted to get out of the house as quickly as possible. When Mike stepped toward me, I panicked and shoved him hard before rushing for the door. But before I could get very far, he grabbed my arm and pulled me back. I immediately struggled to break free, and while the two of us were still fighting, a loud knock suddenly came from the front door. 2 police officers had arrived in response to my call. As soon as they came inside, I quickly told them everything I had found and asked them to investigate Mike. However, the officers still gave Mike a chance to explain himself. Even then, I refused to let it go. I remembered one of the pictures hanging on the wall and insisted to the officers that there might be a hidden camera behind it. As I spoke, I walked over and yanked the picture off the wall to prove my theory, but there was nothing behind it except a completely ordinary wall. No camera, no hidden device, nothing I had imagined. The 2 officers looked at me suspiciously. They started to think that I was the one causing trouble and were preparing to take me with them so they could sort out what had happened. What surprised me was that Mike actually defended me. He explained that I was probably just stressed and had misunderstood what I had seen, adding that he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. After discussing the situation for a while, the officers accepted Mike's explanation and decided to leave. I stood there in the middle of the room, embarrassed and unsure of what to do next. As I watched Mike standing by the door, seeing the officers out, all I could think about was apologizing to him, packing up my things, and getting out of there as quickly as possible. When Mike came back, I was about to apologize when I noticed something different about the smile on his face. He stared at me for a moment, then glanced toward the floor and calmly said that I should have trusted my instincts. I didn't understand what Mike meant until I followed his gaze toward the picture I had knocked off the wall. Hidden inside it was a thick stack of photographs. That was when I realized my suspicions hadn't been entirely wrong. While I was still staring at the photographs, Mike suddenly lunged at me and tried to overpower me. I fought back with everything I had, desperately trying to push him away and make it to the door, but Mike was much stronger than I was. During the struggle, he repeatedly struck me, and eventually I fell to the floor. Just when I started to think I wasn't going to make it out, there was another sudden knock at the door. It was the same 2 officers who had just left. As I struggled to keep my eyes open, I saw one of the officers running toward me, while the other had Mike restrained and was putting him in handcuffs. That was the last thing I remember before I completely lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Once my condition had stabilized, I told the police everything that had happened, including the stack of photographs I had discovered after they left the house. That was when I learned that the 2 officers had returned because, while driving away, they realized that certain details in Mike's explanation didn't quite add up, so they decided to come back and take another look. Thankfully, they changed their minds, because if they had returned even a little later, I don't know what might have happened to me. After that experience, I still didn't give up on my dream of becoming a mystery writer. But I learned to think about my instincts differently. A lot of the conclusions I jumped to that day were premature, and I acted before I had enough evidence. But that initial feeling that something was wrong hadn't been completely unfounded. Sometimes we can sense that something about a person or situation isn't right before we even understand exactly why. The important thing is to stay calm enough to protect ourselves without letting panic control every decision we make. And if there's one clear lesson I took away from what happened in Mike's house, it's this: never judge how safe someone is based solely on their appearance. Mike was handsome, polite, and had a smile that made him seem completely harmless. But behind that appearance was someone entirely different from the person I thought I was meeting when I first walked through his door.